The first time I walked down the alleyway, it was night. A huge wooden wall hid the construction site beyond it, making the path in front of me even narrower. Frying Pan Alley. I loved the name. It was quaint and cosy. It sounded familiar too. My girlfriend had moved in while I was away. I was 5,500 miles from the little street in East London, staying at an old wooden house in downtown LA. I shared my bed with a tabby cat named Jack London. I'd flicked through a few of his namesake's books while staying there. That's where I'd seen the street name before. Chapter 6, from the People of the Abyss. Frying Pan Alley and a glimpse of Inferno. It described the poverty Jack London had found when he walked down the same East End street in 1902. Children swarmed around him like animals, the houses overcrowded slums, people born, living and dying in the same place at the same time with no way out. My interest was stirred. I wanted to know more. So I looked. First there had been Romans, next burial grounds, and then later a hospital nearby. Time passed, and in the 1500s archers practiced in the open fields that would become our home. Then tenter yards were erected, and small cottages started to dot the landscape. Spitalfields Market opened in 1638, and by then the surrounding streets that still exist today were visible, but Frying Pan Alley was only a jumble of unconnected buildings. Brick replaced the wood and plaster houses in the early 1700s, and that's when Frying Pan Alley emerged. The street was named after the ironmongers and braziers who worked along it. They hung a frying pan outside their premises to advertise the business. But the brick houses became homes for immigrant weavers. They had come to London to work, but they were now struggling to get by in a collapsing industry. Cheap imports lessened the demand for British silk. With their hours decreasing and wages cut, families slipped below the poverty line. Poverty was still rife when the Jews' Free School moved onto the corner of Frying Pan Alley in 1820. It took in 900 children from the area. The school grew several times over the next 80 years. It ultimately became the largest elementary school in the world, 4,000 children passing through the gates each day. So when Jack London found Frying Pan Alley in 1902, he must have passed the school, although he made no reference to it. I found another writer, Israel Zangwill, who described the school and its pupils at great length. As a child, he'd actually attended himself, and stayed there to become a teacher. His book, Children of the Ghetto, was published in 1892, so perhaps Jack London was merely keen to avoid treading the same ground in his own account. In 1939, the school was evacuated for the war, and less than a year later, it was bombed. After the war, businesses grappled for space amongst the residential buildings. Offices continued to grow in the 70s and 80s. Our flats appeared at the start of the millennium. Soon after, the southern side of the alley was flattened, and I arrived back in England as a new building was starting to emerge. It was a huge student development. Lying in a daze recovering from jet lag, I watched the building opposite extend upwards, another story each day, until it towered above us in the sky. When it finally opened, the dust and debris was swept away, and the thin alleyway I'd first walked down went with it. It was more like a plaza now, nighttime flooded with light, and voices from all over the world floating on the air. London's landscape has always been changing. Sometimes the reinvention and renovation is nostalgic, other times they ruthlessly flatten the past. Frying Pan Alley is a quaint, fairy tale name for a road, but something got lost along the way in redevelopments and the concealment of poverty. It's a pity that the street does not live up to the images it conjures. But I still like the name.